Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 7th Annual Great Agri-Food Debate. My name is Simon Scroop. I used to work in AIB as head of corporate banking, but I'm delighted to say that I retired earlier this year, so I'm a man of leisure. And I have lots of time to give to such a debate, so I'm delighted with the honour of having to moderate today. So welcome to the Great Debate. Students of food and agriculture from third level colleges across Ireland and the UK are gathering virtually for the debate this year, the second year running that we're doing it virtually. This is a great initiative. It's a joint initiative between Dawn Meats and McDonald's, who are very proud to be supporting the next generation of business leaders in Ireland and the UK. So the topic for this particular debate is British and Irish agriculture is diverse and inclusive. It's a big theme, it's very topical, and I'm really looking forward to hearing the pros and cons of this topic. So to kick off this morning then, may I introduce the two teams. The two teams taking part in this debate is University College Dublin, no strangers to the Great Food Debate, and you're very welcome. And also we have our colleagues from the University of Limerick, and a big welcome to you guys as well. Again, no strangers to the Great Agri-Food Debate. Proposing the motion are the team from UCD, and opposing the motion are the team from UL. Now, it is important to understand that the stance taken by the teams are the positions they have been assigned by random draw and do not necessarily reflect their personal point of view. That's an important point, particularly when it comes to Q&A later. The Twitter handle for the debate is #GreatAgriFoodDebate. You will notice that your microphone has been muted automatically, and we ask you to kindly keep it muted unless you are speaking. So now we have some very important people joining us this morning. We have 4 judges, and I'm going to ask them in turn to introduce themselves and maybe say a few words. So can I call on the first judge, please? We have flown him in here at great expense today, all the way from HSBC. He's Senior Relationship Director, Mr. Russell James Williamson. Russell, please.
Thanks, Simon. I'm Russell Williamson. I'm the Head of Food and Agri in HSBC Ireland. This is the first year that I've participated in the debate. Delighted to support our client, Dawn Meats and McDonald's, in this. And I'd just like to wish all the participants the very best of luck today.
Thank you, Russell. Next up is Harriet Wilson. Harriet is Agriculture Manager for McDonald's. Good morning, Harriet, and you're very welcome.
Good morning, Simon. Good luck to all of the participants today. Really looking forward to listening in on this debate. We've had some fantastic debates this week, and this is going to be equally as brilliant. So yeah, I look after agriculture and sustainable sourcing for McDonald's UK and Ireland. Thank you
very much, Harriet. The third judge this morning is Sarah Hare, and Sarah is Agriculture Manager with Dunbia. Good morning, Sarah, and you're very welcome.
Morning, Simon. Yes, I'm Sarah Hare, Head of Agriculture for Dawn Meats, and yeah, delighted to be part of this again. This is not my first time doing this, but it's always a great session to listen to the calibre of students that we've got coming through. So good luck to both teams, and looking forward to this debate.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And every panel of judges has a celebrity judge. We have managed, we were looking for Simon Cowell to join us today, but we were left with someone of equal standing. We've flown him in at great expense, Dr. Richard Clinton from Dawn Meats. Good morning, Richard, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Simon. I'm Richard Clinton, Group Commercial Director with Dawn Meats, and I've been with the business since joining as a graduate trainee in 1984. I'm looking forward to this important debate and listening to the arguments of the teams, who I'm sure have spent long hours in preparation for today's event. I'd like to thank our co-sponsors, McDonald's, our moderator, and my fellow judges for once again taking time from their schedules to engage in the Great Agri-Food Debate. To you, the speakers and your supporting teams, I hope you enjoy the experience, and thank you for your participation.
Thank you very much, Richard. Nice words. Okay, so it's absolutely wonderful to welcome the students of UCD and UL to the virtual stage. We're about to begin. the Great Agri-Food Debate this morning. Before we do so, can I just very quickly revise some of the main rules? Now, I know the detailed rules have been shared with each of you before this morning, but just some key points to remind ourselves. The team captains will open and close the debate and introduce their teammates. Each student's speech will be a maximum of 5 minutes. Time will be monitored by a designated timekeeper whose decision is final. In this case, it's Beth Ann Travis, and you're welcome, Beth Ann, and thank you for your time today. Interrupting a student while they are speaking is not allowed. After each speaker, 1 point of information may be offered by the competing team. Points of information are not allowed following the captain's closing arguments. One or two other things. It's fully understood by all participating in this debate, including the audience, that the debating the selected motion will be done while to the best of your ability, but it does not necessarily represent your personal views. So that's taken for granted. And the most important ingredient of today's exercise is that this debate is intended to be fun. So please don't be nervous. It's a fun opportunity. Relax and enjoy it. So with all that said and all the formalities out of the way, it gives me great pleasure now to introduce the captain of UCD, who is proposing the topic today. British and Irish agriculture is diverse and inclusive. So I'm welcoming Ms. Ciara Fox to the stage, please. Good morning, Ciara, and you're welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Simon. Chairperson, judges, members of the opposition, ladies and gentlemen, I'd firstly like to welcome you to this once again online Great Agri-Food Debate. My name is Ciara Fox, and I am the proud captain of the UCD team here today, where we profoundly propose the motion that British and Irish agriculture is inclusive and diverse. Let me start by clarifying the motion here today. British and Irish is referring to the countries of England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and Ireland. According to the Oxford Dictionary, agriculture is the science or practice of farming. Now, this is from growing crops to feeding livestock, producing products, and all the way up to research thereon. Diverse means showing a great deal of variety, while inclusive is about not excluding any groups or individuals. But we can't forget the small yet significant word in today's motion, is. We're talking about the present day. So unlike the opposition, my teammates and I, while referring to the past on occasion, will speak firmly of what is happening today in the agricultural sector of Britain and Ireland. And even though history is important, I don't look at the milk check from 20 years ago. But look at me, I am the child of a farmer. However, more importantly, in terms of this debate, I am the daughter of a farmer. And I've never tried to hide that part of me. I have always been involved in our agricultural sector, yet not once have I felt excluded therefrom. The opposition will tell you how our industry is merely rapidly expanding male dairy farmers with milking over 300 black and white cows. However, I come from a small-scale dairy farm with beautiful red cows, and I will continue my family farm at home with no expansion and with no black and whites. And the opposition would call me the exception. But with 74% of our dairy farmers having less than 100 cows, inclusion isn't the issue. Well, let me expand on that. Across all the British Isles, there's great diversity in our system types. In livestock, we can have organic farming, indoor or outdoor systems, spring or winter systems in dairy. We've mass production of vegetables or a small backyard of them. Whatever you want, you're a part of our industry. There is a spot for everyone. It's just not all the same market. I suppose you could call it diverse. But let's look at diversity in terms of our products that our industries produce. And I'll start with my personal favourite, milk. You may think all of our milk goes to our supermarket shelves as packed whole milk. However, that's only 5% of it. The rest, are you ready for this list now? Skim milk powder, whole milk powder, infant milk formula, cream, casein, whey, cheese, yogurt, ice cream, butter, curd. I'm running out of fingers. How about all the products we get from a beef animal or a sheep? I'd love to list them all. However, I don't think I or the opposition have the time. Our diverse product range says it all. So without further ado, let me introduce you to my fellow teammates here today. Bronwyn will start us off by discussing the hot topic of gender in agriculture. She will tell you about the Agri-Food Diversity and Inclusion Forum set up in Ireland and their aims in relation to gender representation in our industry. She will carry on and mention the Equality Act of 2010 that the UK have in place to prevent any gender discrimination. Hannah will then review our diversity and inclusion in relation to race and age. It's common for people to think of older farmers when thinking of agriculture. However, Hannah will prove that not everyone in this industry has a walking stick. She will carry on to show how each race is included in agriculture in all aspects, from study to careers to research. Our fourth speaker, Maria, will talk us through the advantages to businesses by being inclusive and diverse in their choices. She will discuss our diverse career options, showing how we can pursue what we wish in this variety-full sector. But to sum it all up, if I'm being honest, I find it near offensive that the opposition will tell you that a sector I have grown up in is not inclusive nor diverse. As I sit here with my female teammates, I struggle to see how women in agriculture aren't included. From working with non-nationals on farm, I struggle to see how race diversity is an issue. With all of our different systems in both Ireland and the UK, I can't understand how we can't be seen as diverse. And by the end of this debate, there is no doubt that my team will have you convinced that British and Irish agriculture is inclusive and diverse. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you very much, Ciara. That was the captain of UCD proposing the motion. Point of information, yes, please.
We decided to mention that we are also basing our figures on the present day, the most recent available data, 2016 Farm Structure Survey from the Central Statistics Office for Ireland, and 2017 data for Britain. Thank you.
Thanks for that point of information. All I can say is I look forward to hearing these points, and I can't wait to pull you back up in them.
Thank you very much to the captain of UCD proposing the motion today, Ciara Fox. So now it gives me great pleasure to invite the captain of UL opposing the motion, British and Irish agriculture is diverse and inclusive. I'd like to welcome Sarah Sheehy to the stage, please. You're welcome, Sarah.
Hello, good morning, moderators, timekeeper, adjudicators, fellow speakers, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Sarah Sheehy, and my team is representing the University of Limerick, and we strongly oppose the motion that British and Irish farming is diverse and inclusive. Characterised beautifully by Bull McCabe in John B. Keane's The Field, it's my field, it's my child, I nursed it, I nourished it. So much of what makes up Ireland and Britain is owing to the deep-rooted culture and heritage of farming, an industry we rely on to provide us with sources of nourishment that we need in our daily lives, such as high-quality protein, energy-fueling carbohydrates, and tasty, tasty fats. The agri-food sector in Ireland makes up 7.1% of all employment, with exports of 14.5 billion in 2019, with a majority of what Irish farmers produce going overseas and a huge reliance on imports. With food and farming in Britain responsible for 4 million jobs and worth £120 million to the economy. Diversity in terms of people can be defined as recognising and respecting, no matter the difference, including and not limited to gender, ethnicity, age, race, religion, economic background, and geographical location. Inclusivity can be defined as the act of being valued and respected regardless of personal characteristics, background, or circumstance. Whereas farming diversity and inclusivity refers to all types of farms, livestock, crops, horticulture, aquaculture, forestry and farming techniques, agribusiness and agri-food sector, and fair and equal treatment for all of those, access to resources and opportunities, and a place of belonging in community. According to the EU, red meat includes sources such as beef, pork, lamb, goat, venison, horse meat. But let's leave that last mentioned one to another debate. Poultry meat, such as chicken and turkey. However, in Ireland, outside of a select few, such as dairy farming, farming here is in no way diverse, with Britain a little less reliant on dairy farming. Fish are a national asset to both of our islands. Yet Irish waters have been exploited for her rich source of fish supply due to the common fisheries policy, with EU member states coming in and sweeping up 85% of the quota for Ireland's waters, decimating coastal communities, with a similar fate for Britain, now too due to Brexit, both of which could be agreed to due to the carelessness of politicians more interested in keeping in favour with the EU than the livelihoods of their own citizens, who, without them, unless they suddenly developed the ability to self-sufficiency through photosynthesis, would be hard-pressed to survive on light and air, which was what many of them seem to expect the farming communities of Ireland and Britain, including that of fish farming. According to the IFA, fish farming in Ireland is worth 150 million at Farmgate, with full-time job aquaculture creating 2.27 additional jobs locally, which can add and improve to the diversity of farming in Ireland. Yet, even though the majority of Irish fish farming is organic, it is often demonised and difficult to acquire licensing, taking one of Ireland's salmon farming companies 10 years for the Department of Agriculture to grant them an aqua farming licence. Now let me introduce you to my teammate, the other half of this team, Miss Mary Curtin, hailing from North Cork, and who in our first ever introduction to one another, gleefully stated, "I just love farming." Today we will discuss the lack of diversity and inclusivity within the types of farming and the vulnerability our farming industries are exposed to as a result. The exclusionary nature of farming in terms of gender and age, which will be the detriment to what is a huge part of Irish society.
We have a point of information from Maria. Thank you, Maria.
Sarah, we are diverse. We have more beef farmers than dairy farmers. Tillage is the second most profitable base in the agri-career. We fish, as you said. We have forestry, organic farming, part-time farmers, share farmers. How are we not inclusive?
In response to that, I would like to say that if we were as diverse as you put forward, we wouldn't be in the situation that we are currently in with the shortages with wheat and various crops, which the politicians are very quick to blame on the current conflict in Ukraine. But the reality is that there was a wheat shortage before that.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah, for that opening comment. Now I'd like to invite Sarah's colleague from University of Limerick opposing the motion. I'd like to invite Mary Curtin to the stage, please. Good morning, Mary, and you're welcome.
Good morning. Thank you very much. So my name is Mary Curtin and I'm a UL student living and working on a farm in North Cork. And I'm delighted and grateful for the opportunity to speak here today. And I formally oppose the statement that British and Irish agriculture is diverse and inclusive. Diversity and inclusivity in any sector is hugely important for everyone involved, and especially for the success of that sector. But unfortunately, the agricultural industry in Ireland and England is not diverse and is not inclusive. A primary example of that is a severe gender imbalance in the sector. I will begin by going back to the grassroots of our agricultural industry, that of land ownership. The most recent data available shows that in Ireland, females represent only 12% of Irish landowners, and females represent only 17% of the UK farmers, both of which are below the EU average of 28%. However, as we know from family farms, this is not the reality on the ground. Of the 71,700 females working on Irish farms today, less than 1/4 are holders of the farms on which they work. The reasons why female farm ownership is still low is due to a mix of reasons, but is primarily because of social and cultural barriers that have continued to endure. Entrenched patriarchal practices persist within farming families and communities, with males inheriting land, thereby perpetuating female or farming as male-dominated. The patriarchal and traditional succession system of passing farms from father to son has been a huge barrier for women's access to land. An indication of how current an issue this is that the Women in Agriculture Stakeholders Group was set up only 6 months ago. Why would it have to be set up 6 months ago if we already have an inclusive and diverse sector? This group is an independent, voluntary body made up of representatives from all the main farming organisations in the country. And their aim is to tackle the current issue of inclusivity and gender balance in the farming sector. There's also the issue that agriculture is one of the least diverse professions. In the UK, only 1% are from Black, Asian, and minority ethnic backgrounds, whereas they make up 17.5% of the UK population, but less than 1% work in agriculture. Farming is noted as the least diverse sector in the UK. 98.6% of farm managers and owners are white British. Farm workers, on the other hand, are a much more ethnically diverse mix. However, this does not indicate a very inclusive industry, given that the ownership of the assets are in the hands of a certain group within society. There's also the issue of age. For example, just 5% of farm holders were aged under 35, which is both a male and female, 35%, which is both a male and female problem regarding inclusivity, but highlights a huge lack of diversity for the sector as a whole, because we need young people who are skilled for the future. However, the age issue is more stark for females. For every one female farmer less than 35, there were 11 male farmers. While the aging demographic of the farming community is a widespread concern, it is a particular issue for women, as I have noted, and especially because 31% of female farmers are over the age of 80. This indicates that many farms are only inherited by women once they are widowed, and highlights that young women are not actively considered as farm successors. Let me give you the quick example of the current knowledge transfer scheme figures. For example, in tillage, 53 women out of the 887 people. What does that tell us? Another example is poultry. There was 228 people involved, only 13 were women. Where is the inclusivity in that? Where is the diversity? Now let us take Teagasc as an example. It was noted recently that less than 10% of staff in senior positions are women. They also discussed the gender pay gap in Teagasc, that 15% in favour of male employees, and therefore are currently no females top managers in the organisation. Now, while I acknowledge some arguments that the opposition may make in terms of the leader of the main farming organisation in the UK being a female, this is not the case in Ireland. Look at the IFA. Therefore, females in the agricultural industry is a huge issue that shows that our agricultural industry is not diverse and not inclusive, and something that needs to change. While women are prominent in the ag industry in terms of agribusiness, this is not reflected in the daughters on farms who are interested, but it is the son that usually inherits. What has been the cause of this lack of diversity and inclusivity? Our patriarchal practices, our indirect tax barriers, our lack of female role models, and our lack of encouragement. Thank you.
POI?
We have one, yes. Kira?
In the UK, 55% of farm workers were family members and 55% of those were female. So with over half of them being women, is there really this exclusion that you're talking about?
Yes, because they're not the owners, they're not on the deeds, they're not on the titles. I'm talking about the ownership of land, which is important. Who owns the assets, who controls the assets, who inherits that asset. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mary from University of Limerick. Now I'd like to revert back to UCD and invite Brownan Fitzpatrick to the stage proposing the motion. You're very welcome, Brownan.
Thank you, Simon. Good morning, Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, judges, adjudicators, and members of the opposition. My name is Brownan Fitzpatrick, and today I'm going to stand before you and prove to you that both British and Irish agriculture is diverse and inclusive. I'm going to focus on the importance of gender equality, but also on its importance for achieving the diverse and inclusive agricultural world that we know. Sarah, you said that we don't produce enough wheat. However, that is simply because we are focusing on our competitive advantage of grass-based production. However, we are an inclusive industry because we have tillage farmers producing wheat, the amount of which is irrelevant in this debate. This debate is not about self-sufficiency or politicians. AgDiff, the Agri-Food Diversity and Inclusion Forum. Is that not inclusive enough? It was established with a clear purpose to advance the diversity and inclusion agenda in the Irish food and drink sector with a strong focus on gender diversity. A case study conducted this year was about Ornua, the Irish dairy products and the proud owner of Kerrygold. The global team of over 2,400 employees from 59 countries, Ornua knows firsthand how people with diverse backgrounds can bring their own perspectives, ideas, and experiences, leading to better strategic decisions. This company was the first to introduce a fertility treatment policy and miscarriage policy to support all their employees, both male and female. They implemented a range of training programs on unconscious bias and belonging. They also increased their efforts in the recruitment process to ensure all candidate shortlists and interview panels were gender diverse. I think this highlights to us just how proactive the biggest Irish exporter of dairy products is on encouraging diversity and inclusivity. AgDiff has partnered with the 30% Club. The 30% Club launched in January 2015 with a goal to achieve better gender balance at all levels in leading Irish businesses. So, the objective of this initiative is to position the Irish food and drink sector as the industry of choice for Ireland's best talent at all levels across all fields of discipline. A broad mix of role levels participated in the research they carried out. 55% of CEOs who responded to the survey are female. I think this reflects the fact that female CEOs are highly engaged when participating in D&I research. Time and again, research shows diverse companies outperform their lesser peers. Mary McAleese, a patron of the 30% Club, stated that achieving real progress in gender diversity is equally about men and women working together for change. As we all know, women are key decision makers on farms, in businesses and in rural communities, and have been for as long as anyone can remember. How many women of the past have milked the cows, ran the farm at home, as well as the housework, and to this day make sure everything is running smoothly? These women today are recognised by the Women in Agriculture Awards that are run by the Irish Farmers Journal and supported by FBD, and are rightfully provided the recognition for the important contribution we all know women make to Ireland's agricultural sector. FBD are also proud members and supporters of the 30% Club. 20% of the board directors of FBD are female, 25% of its executive level, 41% of its managers, and 60% of FBD's overall employees are female. Just as a farmer understands the value of diversifying his or her crops, the industry as a whole is benefiting from efforts to include women in positions of management and ownership. The Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs in the UK have the Equality Act 2010, which makes it illegal to discriminate against anyone because of their age, gender, being pregnant or on maternity leave, race, religion, sex. How can the opposition argue that this strategy makes them the equitable, diverse and inclusive nation all strive to be? Gender equality is also a cross-cutting objective of the new Common Agriculture Policy 2023 to 27. Key objective of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and a priority for the Government of Ireland. The CSO's 2016 Farm Structure Survey stated that there were 16,000 women that are farm holders. They recorded nearly 72,000 women working on farms. The new stakeholder strategy for the Irish agri-food sector, Food Vision 2030, recognises the contribution of women to the sector's long-term sustainability and includes a number of actions to promote and improve gender balance at all levels. The course I'm doing myself, agricultural science, is always half and half male and female. Will all these young, educated people be entering into an industry in which they don't feel included or equal to their colleagues? The fact that horse racing, an agricultural entity, is one of the only sports that men and women compete equally shows us how inclusive agriculture is. You try telling Rachel Blackmore that she isn't included. As a woman in agriculture and in horse sports, I can appreciate the quality in both sectors. We can clearly see that both British and Irish agriculture are inclusive and diverse.
Thank you very much, Brennan.
Point of information.
Yes, please. Mary,
Hi, it's just in terms of you're saying they're key decision makers that, you know, they run the farm. Yes, but like previously mentioned, they're not owners of the farm, not owners of the asset. 2010 Act, why did we have to bring in an act in 2010? And it had to be forced to lobby to get that into CAP. Thank you.
Thank you. We're talking about inclusivity, not equality. Just because the man's name says that he's owning a farm doesn't mean the woman doesn't do anything. If a woman and a man both own the farm, there's no need for two names to be put down.
Okay, thank you, Bron, and thank you, Mary, for that point of interest. Now, may I invite Sarah Sheehy from University of Limerick back to the stage, please, opposing the motion. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. In Ireland, we have 7.2 million cattle, with Britain having over 9.3 million. It is considered to be the most viable, also has the worst reputation due to the amount of CO2 emissions released as a result of dairy and beef farming. But is this perceived viability due to the long-term favouritism over other farming types? And would it still be considered the most viable of all farming options should incentives, subsidies and tax relief allowed? Conventional farming focuses on one type of farming, relying monocrop, single animal as its source of income, whereas regenerative farming calls for taking into account the whole picture, making connections between different aspects of agriculture, species, land, and allowing one to work synergistically or in symbiosis with the other. More than 75% of food crops globally rely on pollinators, which have been decimated due to various pesticides used in our farming here in Ireland and Britain. Yet organic farming is consistently viewed as an unviable option. But who's to blame? Are farmers solely to blame for this lack of diversity? Consumer demand and consumer ignorance to the impact of below cost selling by retailers such as Aldi and Lidl with their 49-cent packs of carrots and other vegetables. This is legal in Ireland. However, it's funnily enough not legal in Germany, for example. Farming in Britain and Ireland is a commodity-based practice, and at the end of the day, farmers need to put food on their own tables. In 2019, in a national farm survey, Teagasc found 34% of farms in Ireland were classified as viable, with a whopping 33% economically vulnerable. Perhaps if the agri-food sector ensured that farmers received a fair price for meat or crops they needed in order to run a business, the farmers wouldn't be overgrazing in order to further maximize yield to a point where they could be considered viable and be willing to go into a more diverse type of farming. Now, I'm going to talk about goats, not the farm animal with only 30 commercial units in Ireland, but the farming community, scapegoats for the EU, scapegoats for the government, scapegoats for the general population. There is so much talk about reducing carbon emissions, reducing meat and dairy consumption, and becoming carbon neutral. But there is so much responsibility placed on the shoulders of our farmers. With the likes of big tech companies and banks buying up land, outbidding potential new generation farmers for farmland in the process in order to offset their carbon footprint. Banks who will soon be refusing farmers loans if they fail to meet the initiatives handed down by the EU. How is this fair? How will this create more diversity and inclusivity? It doesn't. While they don't hold all the responsibility, they still must play their part. Yet KMPG survey showed that 50% of farmers had no strategy in place in order to reduce emissions. Of course, taking care of the environment and preventing further damage to ecosystems due to conventional farming practices is of the utmost importance and needs to be prioritised, with the long-term outcome of replenishing the land and bringing back pollinators. But for individual farmers, trying to keep their head above water and the banks off their backs, at the end of the day, money talks, and in this commodity-based industry, that often means farmers are left with no other choice but stick with what they know will bring in the money, hold on to their land and continue to put food on the table. This is preventing farmers becoming more diverse and inclusive. Thank you.
POI?
We have a POI, okay. I was pausing there waiting for it, all right. Who put their hand up?
Hi, sorry, myself, Hannah.
Hannah. Hi, Hannah. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Sarah, I simply can't comprehend how your speech relates to diversity with carbon emissions and farmers reducing their own carbon emissions when we have multi-species clover organic farmings. What more do you want farmers to do?
In response to that, compared to other countries in the EU, Ireland is way under the level of organic farming across those other countries. And the reason I'm referring to stuff such as the carbon emissions and the penalties that they will infer if they don't try and meet those requirements is because if they're not able to get the funding in order to become more diverse within their farms, they're not going to be able to do anything at all.
Okay, thank you, Hannah, for the question, and thank you, Sarah, for the response. Now, this debate is really firing on all cylinders, so it gives me great pleasure to invite Hannah Tilley from UCD, that's proposing the motion with her colleagues. Hannah, you're very welcome. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you. Chairperson, adjudicators, timekeeper, members of the opposition and honoured guests, thank you for being here today. My name is Hannah Tilley and I'm delighted to represent University College Dublin today with my team to show you how British and Irish agriculture is diverse and inclusive in many ways. Before divulging my main points, I wish to address some of the opposition's points. Mary, yourself a woman in agriculture, mentioned the Women's Agri Group, which was formed 6 months ago. It has since received massive backlash from the media and especially with women in ag across the country because it has created a huge barrier between men and women. Sarah, how are we below our EU counterparts when we have the lowest carbon footprint in the EU? Teagasc, an Irish research organisation, is also the most forthcoming with environmentally friendly farming practices. To begin, I wish to use myself as an example. As you may already be able to tell, I don't look out my window every day to see sheep grazing, as I am from the centre of Dublin. I mean, the only time I'd previously seen more than an acre of land was when I went on a school trip to the Phoenix Park. Having lived here my entire life, I've only been on a farm a handful of times, yet I'm studying animal science as part of agriculture. The reason for this is because I had the opportunity to study agricultural science for the Leaving Cert. Picture that for inclusivity. Myself amongst a group of D4 heads and the international students in the city centre studying ag. And if you think my accent is thick, you should hear theirs. With this in mind, the figures have shown that there has been a 43% increase in students studying higher level agricultural science in the last decade, which just shows how widespread the subject has become. This is a great gateway for people from all walks of life to get involved in the sector. Thankfully, I'm not alone in thinking this. There are plenty of people from Dublin and non-farming backgrounds throughout the food and agricultural science in UCD and many universities in Ireland. Along with that, we have several international and exchange students and a food and business with Chinese studies program that allows for insights into completely different cultures and ways of learning. The vast mix of backgrounds among students and the school's faculty and how well we all blend is a simple proof that this sector includes young people from many backgrounds and will continue to be in the coming years. Through our exchange programme, I've learned that UCD is not alone in welcoming international students. Many colleges throughout the UK and the north of Ireland also run similar programmes, allowing for varied views in their degree programmes. This broad outlook on farming and food in Ireland and the UK does not just stay amongst young people, as Mary would have tried to lead you to believe. Most farmers are aged 50 plus. Many of you have seen the emphasis on family life in both sectors from parents, grandparents and extended family from the time you were young. Although older generations have enormous willingness to pass on their knowledge and when the time comes their land with younger and up-and-coming workers of this sector, which allows for a seamless fusion in the ages. Along with this, many people in the sector are delighted to welcome various people from different backgrounds. So Engage, which runs social farming throughout Ireland, is an example. Social farming offers people who are socially, physically, mentally or intellectually disadvantaged the opportunity to spend time on a family farm in a healthy, supportive and inclusive environment. They've opened the door to agriculture and food for people in Ireland, from Abdul Hadi, a Syrian refugee, to many people with disabilities. No one is left out in our industries. Not alone in our inclusivity, several similar programs are run in the UK, like Social Farms and Gardens. They run courses on introduction to working with people who have a learning disability or autism spectrum disorder on a care farm or other green care sites. Along with this, they run programs for children from cities and disadvantaged areas to allow them a foot in the door to the agriculture and food sector. So another great program in the UK is Sustainable Food Places. It is a network that brings together pioneering food partnerships from towns, cities, boroughs, districts and counties across the UK that drive innovation and best practices on all aspects of health and sustainable food. It is a partnership programme led by the Soil Association, Food Matters and Sustain, the Alliance for Better Food and Farming. They're constantly working on increasing gender and ethnic diversity through their food programmes. Without any doubt, Ireland and the UK are championing diversity and inclusivity while continually finding ways to improve and grow. I hope we have shown you why today. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Hannah. Well done. We don't have a point of interest. We do. Okay, sorry, Sarah, I cut you off there. Go ahead, please, Sarah, from University of Limerick.
Hannah, you refer to Ireland as being the lowest of carbon emissions in Europe. However, that doesn't mean that they don't need to work on improving the carbon emissions. The Climate Action Plan says Ireland will have to reduce their GHG emissions in agriculture by 22%, 30%.
Thank you for your point of information, Sarah. Yes, although every country in the EU and throughout the world does need to improve on their carbon emissions, it doesn't mean that we aren't proud to be the most forthcoming in Europe.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah, for that point, and thanks, Hannah, for your response. Okay, so next up, opposing the motion, and to remind ourselves, it's British and Irish agriculture is diverse and inclusive. Opposing that motion from University of Limerick is Mary Curtin. You're welcome, Mary. Back to the stage, please.
Wonderful, thank you. So I suppose to give an overall view of the lack of inclusivity in agriculture, I will discuss a common agricultural policy, which was also known as a single farm payment, and has also been a huge area that has showed lack of inclusivity. For example, 90% of payments go to one gender, men. However, aside from the clear lack of diversity in terms of who is receiving the payments, is the actual issue of CAP itself. Now, while it is acknowledged that there are advantages to the current system of CAP, it could be argued that it is not inclusive, given that it is still based on the historic payment model. The reference years were 2000, 2001, and 2002. Much has changed since the early 2000s, yet the historical payment system still exists in Ireland. In the recent CAP talks in Europe, they actually discussed this issue, and there was a call to give all farmers an equal slice of EU payments. However, the IFA argued that this would risk more farms becoming unviable, while proponents say it was needed to level the playing field for small farms. The critical issue was convergence, which is a process to redistribute and flatten the value of CAP payment entitlements. Internal convergence is designed to even out all payments between farmers within the same member state. This means regardless of size, historical entitlements, they receive the same payment per hectare. This was a huge issue for Ireland. While 17 member states, for example, Germany and the Netherlands, have already completed internal convergence, Ireland instead opted for partial redistribution. It could be argued that the Irish approach shows lack of inclusivity because the current rates are still based on those historical figures of what someone was doing back in the early 2000s. However, it is argued and acknowledged that Ireland has redistributed money from farmers with payment values above the national average to below the national average, bringing each farmer's per hectare payment up to at least 60% of the average. Although Europe wanted 100% mandatory internal convergence, Ireland has decided for 85% and by 2026. However, Irish MEPs have noted that 72,000 farmers would have benefited from convergence, while 49,000 would have lost out. As noted, some groups say the payments as they are necessary. However, others have noted that those on larger entitlements have had an unfair advantage for too long. It is also acknowledged that new entrants are entitled to the average payment. However, there are many farmers on multiple amounts, which is still based on the historic payments. But we acknowledge that they are being reduced so that farmers on less than the average can increase. But are you really making it more inclusive when you're waiting until 2026 to do it and only by 85%? But again, 100% convergence. That might not be inclusive, given that those farmers with the most hectares would benefit most, and therefore a tiered approach might be more an inclusive option. Another example, and as previously noted by Sarah, and its relevance to this debate, is that of the lack of diversity and inclusivity in agriculture in terms of the types of farming being carried out, which has already been put into sharp focus because of Ukraine and the issue of supply chains. For example, only 3.4% of farms were under tillage, according to the Farm Structure Survey. And we're facing a crisis, as recently Minister McDonald has called for more farmers to plant tillage to try and deal with the lack of supply due to the crisis in Ukraine. The reliance and emphasis on beef and dairy has not been good for our country in terms of diversity of production. I'll also just mention the fact we had our own beet factories. The Irish Sugar Company, part of Greencore, closed the Mallow Sugar Beet Processing Factory in 2006 after 80 years of sugar production so that we could import it. We're lessening our diversity in terms of what we can produce, in terms of being self-reliant, in terms of the different types of farming we include in our country. There's some other options I can mention. For example, International Women's Day this week, it was noted that in terms of the toys that children play with are often the tractors, usually for the boy. Yes, we see our pink tractors, which is a brilliant thing, but again, to force this inclusivity, we have to drive it. And as was mentioned by Hannah in terms of the women in our cultural group, okay, they might have got some backlash, but they are there to help recognise the women on the farm, to help it promote inclusivity, because we need to, because it is lacking at the moment. As well as that, there are plenty other things in terms of factories, noting having a cartel. Why do we need anti-competitive issues? As mentioned, there was gender, there is age. We have the fact that farm organisations in Ireland are male. We have access to land because of inheritance. There are so many issues, that so many I can't have time to mention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
POI?
Yes, please.
Yes, please, yeah.
You love to talk about CAP, but what about GLOS, which promoted environmental diversity and diversity within our different systems as well?
So I will accept that point and respond. So why I discuss CAP is because it is a current issue, and as you pointed out, that we need to discuss the current issues. Yes, GLOS is there, that's environment. I'm talking about CAP in terms of entitlement, in terms of payment that each farmer is entitled to. And it is all aimed, it's 90% for one gender. And I'm talking about equality, that one farmer at one side of the hedge because they were very productive in 2000, are still on big payments. The farmer at the other side of the ditch, who maybe might not have been productive 20 years ago, but now is on much less. I'm talking about the inclusivity in terms of the payment redistribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Ciara, for that point of interest, and thank you, Mary, for the response. Okay, so to our final speaker before the captain's closing comments is Maria Wall from UCD proposing the motion. Maria, I hand over to you, and you're welcome.
Thanks, Simon. Good morning, Chairperson, adjudicators, members of the opposition, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Maria Wall, and I'm grateful to be a woman given the opportunity to speak in this undiverse industry, or so the opposition would like you to think. But it's not like there's 6 women speaking here today. Let me once again remind you of the title here today. Irish and UK agriculture is diverse and inclusive. The opposition are trying to pull the wool over your eyes by rattling off facts completely unrelated to the motion. It seems they may have heard the word diversity and ran with and thought their speech must have completely diverse from one another. My Captain Ciara defined diversity as showing a great deal of variety. Now, if you were to ask me, the only thing that has more diversity in Ireland than farming is the weather. And we all know what that's like. Anyway, my team has already proven how diverse and inclusive the farming sectors are here, both here and across the Irish Sea. But I'm here to drive home that fact by showing you it in practice in our agricultural sector and businesses. I myself am a second-year dairy business student. I told you my exact programme because, believe it or not, UCD offers 11 different programmes within an agricultural science degree. The reason for that is because the options are just so diverse. Students studying ag in UCD can specialise in anything from ag systems technology to agri-environmental sciences, even down to agri-food business with Chinese studies. Now, if that's not diverse, what exactly is? From what I've seen, the opposition lack inclusivity and have only discussed farmers, not the sector as a whole. More often than not, the first career that comes to mind when people hear agriculture is farming at a ground level. That is the adversity that we as agricultural science students face. Although it's an important part, there's so much more to agriculture than just the production of food. According to the national statistics in the UK, there is nearly 4.1 million employees in the agri-food sector, only 4% of which are employed directly on a farm. That means 3.9 million people are working in the hundreds of diverse careers across the sector. Within agriculture, there's a field of unlimited possibilities, and much like all fields in agriculture, you can grow what you want, it just depends what you plant. When I graduate in 2 years, I can walk down the yard at home and throw on a few clusters and say, this is what I want to do with my life. Or I can follow in the footsteps of past graduates, many of whom are judges here today, and end up working in a bank or Teagasc or be a business owner of my own. Agriculture is at the core of every career path in Ireland and the UK. And surely the opposition team will try, but they can't argue with that. Now, nothing screams diversity like either ending up bottle feeding calves for Mary Curtin over in North Cork or being the CEO of Glanbia and still technically both being employed in the same industry. I'm guessing Mary might pay a bit less, but that's a bit besides the point. The career opportunities in agriculture are nearly as diverse as the opinions of our opposition. But at least they can agree that equality and diversity is at the heart of nearly every agricultural company in Ireland and the UK. Since Dawn Meats are hosting this event for us, it'd be wrong of us not to highlight their achievements when it comes to diversity and inclusion. Dawn Meats themselves is a company that was established by 3 farming families in Kilmacthomas, County Waterford, 40 years ago. The business, as quoted by Niall Brown, is now a global company with over 40 nationalities working for the business. And he went on to say, inclusion of such diversity is recognised as a key driver to our success. They, like many companies in Ireland and the UK, pride themselves in being equal opportunity employers and pledge to challenge any stereotypes or bias. Dawn Meats are at the top of their game when it comes to increasing diversity in the business as well as being inclusive. Only recently, Dawn Meats published an article with the title Dawn Meats Supports Pride Month. This shows how progressive and inclusive the company is. Nowadays, companies like Dawn Meats, Glanbia and Nestlé UK are celebrating pride and running webinars to hear stories of why their customers and members are proud. And that's how we can see diversity in agriculture, and that's how we can see we're doing something right. And if the opposition want to fight against the farmers actually doing something right for a change, well, that's their issue. Inclusivity in a nutshell is not excluding any parties or groups involved in something. From December of last year, Glanbia, Ireland's largest dairy processor, is now entirely farmer owned. The farmers are included in decisions that affect their livelihood, and that is inclusiveness perfected to a T. This surely shows that Irish agriculture is not excluding any parties involved in something and values its stakeholders. So stand or sit with me today and propose this motion that Ireland and UK agriculture is diverse and inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria.
Point of information.
Okay, please. Thanks, Sarah.
You mentioned the adjudicators. I'm just wondering if you noticed how many of them in the so far streamed debates were male and how many were female. And if you look at last year's as well, it's just they're made up of various bankers and board members. Kind of goes against your argument.
I personally, Sarah, I don't think that went against my argument at all. The judges here today were chosen because they are leaders within the industry. They weren't chosen because of their gender. They were chosen because of their achievements. They are outstanding in their field, and that's why they're here to judge us, the future leaders of this industry here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Marie. And thanks, Sarah, for raising that. Okay, so for the closing comments and closing arguments for what has been absolutely tremendous and passionate debate, may I first of all invite the Captain of University of Limerick, Sarah Sheehy, opposing the motion for the last time to the podium. Sarah, I hand over to you.
Thank you. Now, while Britain's National Farmers Union have elected a female president, Minette Betters is the only female to head the organisation since its establishment in 1908. And in Ireland, Teagasc is the only organisation with a female leader. But a token woman hardly justifies the suggestion there is inclusivity in farming in Ireland and in Britain, especially when the women farmers in Ireland need to be represented and have their voices heard so policies can be implemented to ensure they receive benefits such as maternity leave. One industry does not count as inclusivity for women. Less than 1% of farms in Ireland have a woman registered as the official partner. In Ireland, less than 10% of staff hold senior positions are women. A recent tweet by Women in Agriculture Stakeholders Group, who the proposing team also had an issue with, which would be who are trying to improve the diversity and inclusivity in Ireland, stated that neither the beef nor dairy conference included female participants and panels recently, and demanded that more work is needed. The figures on committee members, board members and decision makers in agribusiness, such as dairy, meat and cereal processing and food manufacturing, as well as land ownership of farmers, might be somewhat more insightful as to the reality of the current situation. A fair representation of women whose livelihoods are dependent on farming and agri-business in UK and Ireland. Now, the easy option may be to point the finger at farmers of Great Britain and Ireland, and as the proposing team said, that finally farmers are doing something right, but that we are complaining about them for the lack of diversity and inclusivity that we have, and to allow the responsibility to fall on the backs of farming communities. But the responsibility is of communities as a whole. As consumers, buyers, bankers, brokers, and voters of policymakers, we all need to do better rather than passing the buck and the blame. The responsibility is not solely to the farming community, who we rely so heavily on, let seriously take for granted. As was said in the Dáil yesterday, and I know I'm mentioning another politician, and allow me to paraphrase to a more politically correct terminology, it's time for you to pull up your socks, Taoiseach, with regards to the pitiful reduction per litre for farmers to run their tractors on the fuel. On stating in response, Micheál Martin stated we needed to double down on renewables. Had I been there, I would have asked, how much does an electric tractor set you back these days, Taoiseach? When, all jokes aside, is laughable, when our so-called industry is heavily relying on coal burning to provide power to Irish homes. While at the other end of announcing to the media that farmers will have to step up, apparently. Mind you, the Minister for Agriculture was quickly reminded by the IFA that it might be best to, engage with the farming community before pushing these demands on them. I myself am not from a farming background. And if someone were to tell me a year ago that I would be listening to the Farmers Journal podcast in my spare time, I probably would have been checking to see if it was the 1st of April. But what I do know is that farming on Ireland and Britain is not diverse or inclusive. And where there have been some improvements in recent years, there is a lot more work that needs to be done. And if the old boys club continues on with the short-term mentality of if it ain't broke, don't fix it in this community, it's going to be left behind and worse, die out. So on behalf of my fellow teammate, Mary, the girl who loves farming, and myself, I would like to thank the moderator, timekeeper, adjudicators and organisers for the opportunity to take part in such a great event. And of course, to our very gracious opponents from UCD, your patience and sportsmanship is truly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you and good luck to you and your teammate, Mary. So well done. Right, final speaker this morning, proposing the motion for her closing comments and arguments all the way from UCD. I invite Ciara Fox back to the stage, please.
Thank you, Simon. Hello, everyone, once again. Before I start into this, I would like to thank the opposition for the debates today. I can firmly say I enjoyed listening to them. However, I can't say I agreed with them. Sarah, you started by saying how we gave away our fisheries, but we're simply sharing them with our EU partners. Is that not including our EU neighbours? Before the opposition get too carried away with trying to manipulate the motion, let me remind you of what we're debating here today. We are talking about the agricultural industry as a whole. We are not picking apart different parts of the industry and saying that this part isn't as inclusive of women and this part isn't as race diverse. On the whole, this industry admires the role foreign workers play in our industry. In fact, non-UK employees account for over 20% in the agricultural sector, yet only 14% of the population. Mary stressed the point that women are not the owners of these farms in this country, but women don't need to have their name on the paper to feel validated. As you said, 72,000 women are working on farms. So are you telling me that these women don't matter just because they don't own the land? I wouldn't be too pleased to hear a fellow woman say that to me. I think the opposition has gotten most of the confusion from the definition of diversity. Diversity is simply a variety of things, not an equal amount of everything. And I think everyone here knows that if we were to try and equate all workers or all products, it is simply not feasible, whether that be financially or logically. Opposition Speaker Mary also loved to use the example of few non-nationals being hired on farm. However, we need to remember that the farm labour force comprises of 52% of farm holders and 41% of family members. That leaves only 7% of the farm labour to come from a non-family worker. We simply cannot confuse family farming for a lack of diversity. The lack of representation of different races is not as a result of systematic limitations imposed by racism, but following the trend of past Britain, which was predominantly white and the land being passed through said generations. Mary, you also mentioned there was tax barriers against women, but if anything, women are better off because they now receive 60% TAMES grants up to the age of 66. And may I point out, immigrants who came to Ireland and either had or obtained a crop and livestock production degree had the lowest level of unemployment, with 96% of them receiving jobs. That means that the Irish agricultural sector was the most forthcoming and welcoming of immigrants. Yet the opposition want to say we're not inclusive. But let me round up my team's points once again. My teammate Brodwin talked about the Irish company Ornua, who brought in a fertility treatment policy and miscarriage policy, which applied to both men and women. She talked about gender diversity in terms of the 30% club, where we as an industry encourage women to move higher up in companies. But let's not forget that the only Olympic sport where both men and women compete equally is horse sporting events, which means it takes an agricultural sport for both genders to be equal. Now, that's what I call inclusive and diverse. Hannah told us all about her city life, yet she's still pursuing a degree in agriculture, and she has received nothing but encouragement. In her degree, she is surrounded by international students, which allows her to be included and experience their diversities. Hannah discussed the uptake on social farming by including anyone with a disability. While farmers may seem to be ageing, Hannah told us about the involvement these people have on knowledge transfer to younger generations. Finally, Maria informed us of the diverse career paths anyone in this agricultural industry can take. She talked about Gambia, which is now entirely farmer-owned. This allows both big and small farmers to be included in the milk industry. Maria went on to discuss how businesses take pride in their diverse workforce and how they feel they are better equipped for global operations with this team base. To summarise what we are saying here today is that Irish and British agriculture is inclusive and diverse. We are not talking about equality, even though you loved to manipulate the debate topic to suit that. We are simply saying that anyone who wants to be involved in this industry can be. Now that is inclusivity. Given the number of women studying agriculture, given the number of foreign workers wanted on these farms, and given the number of different systems we operate, it is obvious that inclusion and diversity are at the core of agriculture. So I urge you to stand with me today to uphold and propose this motion that British and Irish agriculture is inclusive and diverse. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ciara. That concludes the arguments from both sides, actually, but specifically from UCD. And that was Ciara Fox, the captain of UCD. Thank you to you all for what has been an absolutely tremendous debate, very passionate. I must say, in the 5 or 6 years I've been moderating at the Great Agri-Food Debate, it has been one of the better ones. Both sides, the very best to look to you both. You argued your points and articulated yourselves exceptionally well. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. I do not envy the role and the job of the judges, either in picking a winner here or in picking the best speaker. As you know, there's an award for the best speaker. It's been truly tremendous and a great honor for me to sit here smugly as a moderator, listening to both sides of what was a really tremendous debate. So congratulations to all speakers. Well done. The winning teams will be, of course, those that have attained the highest combined scores, and there's a Best Speaker award as well. So thank you everybody for participating today. A special thanks to the speakers today and those that participated in the debate. And we all agree, those of us looking on, that it has been truly top quality. May I thank the sponsors of today's event, Dawn Meats and McDonald's. Thank you both for the 7th year running sponsoring this fantastic initiative. May I thank the 4 judges for tuning in: Russell James Williamson, Harriet Wilson, Sarah Hare, and Richard Clinton. Thank you all for joining today. And like I said earlier, I don't envy your job. May I thank our timekeeper, Beth Ann Travis, for her work, and the huge and very efficient backroom team led out by Cynthia. But most of all, may I thank the audience for tuning in and supporting this debate. I hope they enjoy it as much as I did listening. It's been a great morning, great debate, and I wish both teams the very best of luck, and the very best of luck to the best speaker. So I'm going to conclude and close out at that, and wish you all the very best. Thank you.